as rational ignorance when the cost of learning a thing is much more higher than the result or the outcome it is going to give us. For example, if our government comes up with an act relating to railways, those of us who are able to afford airplanes or who have other means of transportation will not have as much effect in case of any changes in the railway institution. They could choose to just ignore this legislation and move on with their life. I think if you are able to ignore politics, there can be only like two issues, like two reasons for that. First of all, a rational ignorance, which is the cost is much more, and second is you come from a background of privilege. I think with a country like Switzerland, which has a much more better infrastructure, who has this privilege that he can choose to not get affected by a lot of the world politics, comes from a privilege. But a country such as a developing country like India cannot have this privilege because it is still dependent much more on the other countries. It is much more affected by the world politics. If you look at India, India was much more affected by the Iranian-USA war than Switzerland was, because India is still a developing country. And the same goes for us. If we look at our daily lives, if I was somebody who was extremely rich and extremely privileged, all this world politics, water crisis, AI data center, or any kind of politics in general, I can choose not to speak about it. But somebody who is affected by these changes, somebody who has this middle class life, we all cannot choose to be silent or ignorant about these things. Now, another example of this was the education crisis. I, being a student, will be affected by any kind of new education policies that might come in our way. My parents will be affected by it because they have invested so much on my studies and they are going to further maybe invest much more on my studies. So they cannot choose to be ignorant about these issues. But if you look at the upper class or somebody who is not going to be in India for very long, or somebody who has this opportunity that if the things get hard, they can leave India, they will not be as much as affected by the education policy of India. If the things don't go in their way, they can choose to leave India. But us being part of the system, we don't have this opportunity to leave India. We have to suffer the consequences in case of any ambiguity or any kind of atrocity if that comes with the education policy. Now, if we come to the rational ignorance, I do think it does make sense that if a person is privileged and they can choose to be silent about some things and ignore a lot of the crisis happening in the country, I think it's fair for them. But at the same time, if somebody is privileged, I think it might be a time consuming and a little bit costly to learn about world politics and India in general. But the sad part about all this is that those of us who can choose to be rationally ignorant and who cannot choose to be rationally ignorant have the equal say in the outcome of country. Somebody from a privileged background who can choose to be silent and who can, if something goes wrong, he can just move to another country and settle down, or will have much less effect. Even if he chooses to live in this country, will have much less effect on policies, has the same vote or the same stance or the same power as somebody who cannot choose to be politically ignorant, somebody who has to have an opinion because these things are directly going to be affected by him. For example, in the recent judgment, I've read there some that this one of the lady judges from the Supreme Court said that women in India will not be much affected by the 3-year practice rule. I disagree with that opinion wholeheartedly. Again, if we look at it, if you can be rationally ignorant and you can not be rationally ignorant. Somebody who is from an underprivileged background, as soon as you graduate, I think most of the Indian women have pressure to get married and to settle off. But this 3-year practice rule affects women in much larger scale, because a lot of Indian families will not give 3-year long break to this woman to learn and study about it. But now, because Indian women have to wait 3 long years to get into this judiciary circle, it's much more harder for them, because even if your parents are supportive, 3-year constant bickering, there would be a constant bickering, because they would not be as much as financial independent as a position in judiciary will give them. Now, being from again a privilege, they can be ignorant about the circumstances of a normal woman, a normal Indian woman, because she comes from a privilege. She comes from a family that has supported her through education. But a family that does not support Indian women's education, that girl is going to have a hard time, allowing and pushing those limits with the 3-year practice rule. Now, coming to being politically ignorant and democracy. Democracy, the whole concept of democracy has been, coined by the Greeks, and the democracy is by people, for the people, and to the people, right? So democracy, it kind of pushes a person to choose their own leader. Now, when it comes to democracy, a lot of this push is by the people. The people choose their representative by themselves. Now, democracy cannot be functioned without people, and a lot of the philosophers, being it developed by the Greeks, a lot of the philosophers from the area also disagreed with democracy being governed by the people solely, because a lot of this power is completely dependent on those people who can choose to be politically ignorant, who can just easily be manipulated. If you are politically ignorant, you can be easily manipulated, by the way. A lot of this function and a lot of this power is given to those who don't do their research before choosing their political representative, or who are easily manipulated by the media. And the media right now being compromised, it is very easy for the governing or the government to manipulate or to push those narratives which are not really true to be on the ground, especially in context of India, when the media is compromised so much and the mainstream media hardly covers any main issues in general, with our respective prime minister chooses not to have any kind of without script, any kind of interviews, any kind of media interaction, keeps his media interaction to the minimal level. He can just choose to easily manipulate all of us. Even though democracy's whole function lies with the people, he can choose not to interact with people in general. And since our media is compromised so much, it's so easy to get manipulated and so easily to get lost in lies itself, right? With democracy, I think it's really important that people choose their elective with full consciousness. They kind of fully need to be up to date with the legal updates in India. And if I remember correctly, Plato also said it. I think I've written it actually. So Plato contended that democracy is defective because it adopts policy based on the view of ignorant masses and neglects the better informed counsel of the philosophers. And I agree with this because I don't think all of us are well contended enough to come up with these policies, to come up with a lot of issues, and we're not, the media is compromised, so we cannot rely on the internet, right? So what leaves us is that these philosophers who have done this extensive research and studied so much about this should get a much more higher say in the political genre in general. A lot of people say that I like to be neutral and I don't like to get into politics. The thing about politics is that it affects day to day of our life. The kind of transport you get, the kind of roads you get, to the kind of education you get is completely dependent on the politics of the country. If the government is good, they would likely provide a good highway, they would likely provide good road, they would likely give us good education, and they would likely give a good, healthy, breathable environment to live in. And when the government is not good or incompetent, all of this, just what I've listed before, will get at jeopardy. It affects all of our life, not just in a minute sense, but also to our life. Those people who were killed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were normal people and common people like us. Can they say that politics doesn't affect me as much? Or can they choose to be silent on the matter? When you are poor, can you be silent on political issues? Can you choose to be silent on political issues? If I was rich, I can choose that. But if you are poor, can you? Who is supposed to provide them with a good education? You, me, or the government? The government has the responsibility to provide for the poor, to provide for the needy, to ensure the safety of women. Me being a woman, I cannot choose to be politically ignorant about a lot of issues because it will affect me. If a government's political issues is not good, or it's not competent, or it's not strong enough, it will affect you and me. And being a woman, I cannot choose to be silent on those issues. Now, what it brings me to us as people, we hate to be uncomfortable because learning about politics is actually very difficult. I think it's one of it is really time consuming, and I feel like even right now I don't think I am fully competent or fully well equipped with a lot of the politics. I am still learning and I want to grow in this area because I have realized that every single thing that a government does, it affects me in some way or the other. It affects my family in some way or the other. It affects everything I do, from the air I breathe, to the water I take, to education, to any roads I might lead to, or any travel destination I choose. It affects me. And as a responsible citizen, I think it's a duty to make sure that these kind of issues are well recognized and not really ignored, So I guess what I wanted to do with this video was that I wanted to be very comfortable, very, side this issue of us saying I don't like to get into politics. Even if you don't like to get into politics, the politics gets you. Everything you do is political. Everything around you is political. And political ignorance is a privilege.